any operational technology, OT, environment, people quickly learn that security is not only about blocking attackers, because the real daily challenge is keeping systems reliable while still being able to explain what happened when something looks wrong. That explanation piece matters more than beginners usually expect, because the most stressful moments are not the moments when everything is obviously broken, but the moments when something feels off and nobody can confidently prove whether it is harmless drift or a serious compromise. Building for performance, auditability, and observability is how you create trust you can prove, not just trust you feel. Performance ensures the system can do its job without lag, jitter, or overload that could destabilize control and safety. Auditability ensures actions are traceable, accountable, and reviewable so you can reconstruct events without guessing. Observability ensures you can see enough of the system's behavior to detect meaningful anomalies and verify integrity during recovery. These three ideas reinforce each other, and when they are designed in from the start, they reduce fear, reduce downtime, and support safer decision-making. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Performance in OT is not an optional luxury, because many industrial processes depend on predictable timing and stable response, and that makes performance a safety property as much as an engineering property. Beginners sometimes think performance just means making things fast, but in control environments it often means making things consistent and preventing overload conditions that can create delayed readings, delayed control actions, or confusing operator displays. When performance degrades, the process might still run, but the people operating it lose confidence because screens update slowly, alarms arrive late, or data looks inconsistent. That loss of confidence can lead to risky actions, like switching modes abruptly or restarting systems under pressure, which can make things worse. From a security standpoint, poor performance can also hide problems, because when everything is slow and noisy, abnormal behavior blends in. It can even create false security signals, like dropped logs or missing session records, simply because systems are overloaded. Designing for performance means you deliberately manage load, prioritize critical communications, and avoid adding monitoring or security controls in ways that destabilize the environment you are trying to protect. A practical way to think about performance is to focus on what must remain stable for safe operations, and then treat everything else as secondary. Some data flows are mission-critical, such as control communications and essential status reporting, while other flows are helpful but not essential, like broad analytics or non-critical reporting. If everything competes equally for bandwidth and compute, the most critical functions can suffer when the system is under stress. That is why performance design includes capacity planning, segmentation, and an understanding of which services are allowed to be slow and which services must never be slow. Beginners also need to recognize that performance problems can be caused by both benign and malicious activity. A misconfigured update process can overload a network, and a denial of service effort can do the same, and the operational symptom might look identical at first. When you design for performance, you are also designing for clearer diagnosis, because you can measure what normal capacity looks like, and you can quickly spot abnormal load patterns. In OT, that clarity is a form of safety and a form of security. Auditability is the next piece, and it is best understood as the ability to answer the question, who did what, when, and from where, with evidence that can be reviewed by others. In everyday life, people rely on auditability more than they realize, like credit card statements or package tracking, because it turns confusion into an explainable history. In OT, auditability is crucial because a single configuration change, logic update, or access session can have physical consequences. Beginners often assume the process itself will reveal problems, but many harmful changes are subtle, and the system may keep running while slowly becoming less safe or less reliable. Auditability creates accountability, which discourages risky behavior and makes troubleshooting faster because you can narrow the timeline. It also supports learning after incidents, because you can identify what failed, what succeeded, and where control points were missing. Importantly, auditability is not only for catching wrongdoing. It is also for protecting honest people by showing what actually happened when blame and stress rise. A well-audited environment reduces arguments and speeds recovery. For auditability to be meaningful, it must be designed around high-impact actions, not around collecting endless logs that nobody can interpret. In OT, high-impact actions include changes to controller logic, changes to set points or alarm thresholds, changes to network rules that affect segmentation, changes to remote access policies, and changes to accounts and privileges. If these actions can occur without a traceable record, the environment becomes fragile because you cannot confidently prove integrity after a suspected incident. Beginners sometimes misunderstand audit logs as a purely technical artifact, but auditability is also procedural. Changes should be tied to approvals, tickets, and maintenance windows so that a technical record can be validated against an operational record. When those two records align, trust increases because you can show that an observed change was intentional, approved, and executed by the right person. When they do not align, you have a high signal discrepancy that deserves investigation. Designing for auditability is therefore designing for consistency between what people planned and what systems recorded. Observability is the third pillar, and it is slightly different from logging because it is about whether you can infer what the system is doing from the signals you collect, even when you did not anticipate the exact failure mode. Beginners sometimes treat observability as a synonym for monitoring, but the deeper idea is that you want visibility that supports understanding, not just visibility that produces alerts. In OT, observability means you can see access patterns, communication patterns, and change patterns well enough to detect meaningful deviations from baseline and to verify that the process-related systems are behaving as expected. It also means you can detect when visibility itself is degraded, such as when a log source goes silent or a sensor stops observing traffic, because loss of visibility is often a risk event. Observability is essential for trust you can prove because it allows you to validate claims. If someone says nothing changed, observability lets you check. If someone says an outage was caused by a failure, observability lets you look for signs of malicious activity or misconfiguration. Without observability, decisions become guesswork, and guesswork is a dangerous foundation for operating physical systems. A key beginner misunderstanding is thinking that more observability is always better, when in OT too much data can be as harmful as too little if it overwhelms people or strains systems. Good observability is selective and purposeful, focusing on signals that matter for safety and security. For example, knowing every minor event on every device might be unrealistic, but knowing when privileged sessions occur and what systems they touch is highly valuable. Similarly, you might not be able to instrument every embedded controller, but you can observe network flows to understand who communicates with controllers and when. Observability design also includes time alignment, because events without reliable timestamps are difficult to correlate, and correlation is how you turn signals into understanding. If you see a remote session start, a firewall rule change, and a controller program update within the same window, you want to connect those events into a coherent narrative. Without consistent time and context, you end up with isolated facts that do not add up. Observability is therefore about building an environment where facts can be connected into a defensible story. Performance, auditability, and observability are often treated as separate concerns, but in practice they must be co-designed because each one can undermine the others if handled carelessly. If you add heavy monitoring that strains systems, you might reduce performance and create the very instability you are trying to detect. If you require complex auditing steps that slow down urgent maintenance, people may bypass the process, and bypasses destroy auditability. If you optimize performance by stripping out logging and visibility, you might create a fast system that you cannot trust or explain. The design goal is balance. You want enough visibility to detect and explain, enough auditing to reconstruct and hold accountable, and enough performance to keep operations stable. Beginners should appreciate that this balance is not achieved once and then forgotten. It is maintained over time as systems change, vendors change, and operational needs evolve. A resilient architecture treats these pillars as ongoing requirements, not as one-time projects. When teams share that mindset, Improvements become steady and sustainable rather than reactive and chaotic. Trust you can prove becomes especially important during incident response and recovery, because those are moments when the cost of a wrong assumption is high. If a ransomware event hits enterprise systems, an OT site might still be physically capable of operating, but leaders may hesitate because they cannot prove which systems are affected and whether monitoring remains reliable. If a suspicious remote session occurs, operators may want to continue production, but security may worry about integrity, and the tiebreaker should be evidence rather than fear. Auditability provides the timeline of what happened. Observability provides the signals that support or refute malicious hypotheses, and performance provides the stability needed to keep safe control while decisions are made. Beginners often imagine incident response as a dramatic technical battle, but in OT it is frequently a disciplined decision process under uncertainty. The environment that is best prepared is the one that reduces uncertainty quickly. That reduction comes from having records that can be trusted and signals that can be interpreted. When you can prove trust, you can choose containment steps that are proportional, and you can resume operations with confidence rather than hesitation. Another place where these pillars matter is in vendor support and third-party access, because many OT environments depend on outside expertise for specialized systems. When vendors connect remotely or provide updates, the organization must be able to confirm that access happened through approved pathways, that actions were accountable, and that the environment remained stable. Auditability ensures you can trace what was done during vendor sessions, including which accounts were used and which systems were accessed. Observability ensures you can see whether the session triggered unusual network behavior, unexpected data movement, or unexpected changes outside the vendor's scope. Performance ensures that logging and monitoring do not interfere with the process during maintenance, because maintenance is already a time of elevated operational risk. Beginners sometimes assume that vendor work is inherently trusted, but in a mature environment, trust is managed through evidence. This is not about suspicion of people. It is about protecting everyone by ensuring actions are transparent and reviewable. When an incident occurs later, you do not want to rely on memory and informal explanations. You want verifiable records that allow quick, calm resolution. It is also useful to connect these principles to the idea of change, because change is where many OT problems, both security and reliability, begin. Any change can create new risk, whether it is a patch, a configuration adjustment, a new remote access method, or a network redesign. Auditability ensures that changes are recorded, approved, and attributable, so you can distinguish intentional changes from unexpected ones. Observability ensures that you can see the operational effects of change, such as new traffic patterns or new service behaviors, and quickly detect side effects. Performance ensures that changes do not degrade system stability in ways that create safety risks or operational confusion. Beginners often focus on attackers as the primary source of problems, but in many real environments, mismanaged change is a dominant risk factor. An accidental rule change can open a pathway, and an untested update can cause outages that resemble attacks. When you design for these three pillars, you reduce both malicious and accidental risk. That is one reason they are so valuable. They improve the environment even when no attacker is present. A particularly important beginner lesson is that observability and auditability should be aligned to criticality, because the most critical systems deserve the clearest evidence trails and the most reliable visibility. If a system can change controller logic, it should have stronger auditing than a system that only displays data. If a remote access gateway can reach multiple segments, it should have stronger session logging and stricter access controls than a single-purpose workstation. If a safety-related system exists as the last line of defense, it should be designed so that changes are rare, tightly controlled, and clearly verifiable. This alignment avoids wasted effort because it directs attention to the parts of the environment where trust matters most. It also reduces noise because you are not treating every low-impact event as equally important. Beginners sometimes get stuck trying to monitor everything, but the smarter goal is to monitor what matters deeply and consistently. When you can prove the integrity of the highest consequence pathways, you gain operational confidence. That confidence allows the organization to respond to lower-level issues without panic, because the core safety and controlled trust remains grounded in evidence. Building trust you can prove also influences how teams communicate, because evidence-based environments support clearer collaboration between security and operations. When an operator asks why a security team wants to restrict access, the answer can be grounded in observed patterns and audit history rather than abstract fear. When a security team asks whether a change was planned, the answer can be validated through records rather than informal recollection. This matters because conflict and misunderstanding are themselves risks. They slow response and encourage workarounds. Performance contributes to this collaboration by ensuring systems behave predictably, so that troubleshooting and investigation are not constantly complicated by random instability. Observability contributes by making it easier to share a common picture of what is happening. Auditability contributes by making it easier to agree on what happened. Beginners often underestimate how much security success depends on shared understanding and trust among humans. Designing for these pillars is therefore a cultural investment as much as a technical one. When the environment produces reliable evidence, teams can align faster and act more safely. Ultimately, performance, auditability, and observability are the foundations of an OT environment that can defend itself and recover with confidence, because they turn uncertainty into evidence and evidence into action. Performance keeps control stable and prevents stress from becoming chaos, which protects safety and supports accurate diagnosis. Auditability creates accountability and traceability, which protects integrity and enables fast reconstruction of events. Observability provides the signals needed to detect anomalies, validate hypotheses, and prove that systems are behaving as intended. Together, they produce trust you can prove, which is the kind of trust that survives incidents, vendor changes, and operational surprises. For a new learner, the most useful mindset is to ask, for any important system or pathway, whether you can measure its health without harming it, whether you can trace changes without guessing, and whether you can explain anomalies with evidence rather than assumptions. When you can answer those questions confidently, you are not just hoping your environment is safe. You are building an environment that demonstrates safety and reliability through verifiable facts. That is what mature OT security looks like, and it is a goal worth designing toward from the very beginning.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.